Well, hello, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Parks and Public Works Committee meeting set for July 16th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Present here, we have Councilmember Michelle Dutch, and who's also on this committee, myself, Susan Payne, Shannon Burley from the Department of Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and everything else, and also Kyle Woods, who's also a part of the Parks Capital Program. And with that, I will kick this off with um, a motion, well, a discussion about the procedures along the agenda. We're going to make a small change to the agenda, and that is the first committee business item will be the car show and Oktoberfest event agreements. And then the second one is going to be a brief discussion for the AT&T agreement at Five Corners. This came in hot off the press yesterday, and this is something that we'll take care of in between the car show and Oktoberfest agreements and the discussion about the Mathey Ballinger improvements contract. And then the rest of the agenda will follow accordingly. So with that, let's talk about the car show and Oktoberfest event agreements.
Well, hello, Shannon Burley. Thank you, Councilmember Payne and Councilmember Dotch, for inviting us this afternoon.
Just a quick question. Do I need to second the agenda change?
What's
Sorry,
that?
just real quick, just make sure procedure-wise we're adding that agenda item.
Well, I don't think that we need to do anything first or second because it's not not dispositive. So we're good just by making the good question. No, go. Then there you go.
All right. Go for it.
Good to go. So before you have two event agreements. Just a reminder, all event agreements are routed through all of our city departments, particularly ones of note for these agreements are the streets department, the police and fire, risk management from an insurance perspective, and Sharon, who is very active and involved in all of our contracts from a legal perspective. But all of those have gone through that process. The car show, and this is similar for the other event agreements that have come before you earlier in the year. So far this year, we have authorized contracts for Springfest, the Summer Market, the Arts Festival, 4th of July, and Taste Edmonds. And these are the final two event agreements for the year. Edmonds is a pretty special place and unique in that we have a significant large-scale event every single month from May through September, and two in September, and that's what these two are. And they're coming before you this time of year because much later we start to really bump up against the events. So this is kind of our window for that time. So the car show has been here over 20 years, actually, in downtown Edmonds, and nearly the exact same footprint. I will share that we had a wonderful meeting with the police department and the chamber prior to this one to really discuss some of the load-in challenges, some of the just various things that have changed throughout the years. And we made some slight tweaks to that. We actually, a road that used to be closed only one direction, we have closed it temporarily in both directions for 2 hours. And we've created a new detour route into the Ace Hardware to make sure that their businesses continue to thrive. So just small tweaks to the map to try and that we've learned over time is probably that's one change to the car show contract. The second one is that they've enhanced the experience down by Centennial Plaza. So kind of across the street from City Hall in that plaza area where the market tends to set up. Most people know it as the Summer Market area. In that space, they've enhanced their experience there. They kind of have more of a music and more active space that they're hoping to run there. And so that was the other part of our big meeting with the streets and the police department, was to ensure that that change and the traffic management was done appropriately so that emergency vehicles can continue to do what they do. So those are the biggest changes to the car show event agreement. We are very much working with the chamber. We're in close partnership with the chamber on how they implement this contract, and specifically, given our current situation politically, and making sure that they're very well versed and aware of the best practices and what's expected from the city in exchange for their use of this public space and for bringing the community together. The car show is just a one day event, and it's held on Sunday, September 8th. The second event agreement is run by the Rotary. It's the Oktoberfest. It's their primary fundraiser for the year. This year, they're moving from the Francis Anderson Center down to Civic, which is really, really exciting. That makes it so there's no road closures. So up here, when it's at the Anderson Center, we close one road for their food trucks. And now we just have we have a little bit of parking that we have reserved. That's really to enhance the ADA availability. So we add additional ADA spots close to the event and the event entrances, but then also we have to reserve some parking for their large dumpsters for debris removal and things like that. But other than that, we were able to maintain open right away, which was a really exciting thing for us. This event is free and open to the public with the exception of the beer garden area. And the beer garden area is a paid entrance area. It's a small footprint at Civic, but that is really where the fundraising part comes in for Oktoberfest. This one runs on Friday and Saturday, but not Sunday. So they just each have their own different things. I will share that Oktoberfest will have some pretty fun things like the kids zone, and they tend to do something related to dogs. And I'll let them be the one to market that, but they tend to have a lot of really fun and engaging activities for people throughout the event. And those are all in the free area of the event, including the food vendors that will be there. So people will have access to the event for the most part. They'll be able to hear the music. It's just if they want to partake in some of the festivities that are 21 and over, that there's paid entrance. So again, that one has been reviewed by everybody. It's really nice to not have to deter emergency vehicles or buses. Community transit does not have to change their route now that it's down at Civic. So that's another great reason why we use that larger footprint of that park. So I am available to answer any questions. The request that I submitted was for these to be moved to the consent agenda so that we could hopefully get them executed and begin, really getting into the real work, which is actually putting on the event. So.
Exactly. Go ahead, Michelle.
I have one question on the Oktoberfest contract on packet page 40, 2.4. It says nothing on the grass for toilets, but yet on the design photo on page 47, I think it is, it shows the Santa cans on the north grass. So I don't know if that is something else.
They're not permitted on the grass, just flat. Like they can't just.
Oh, I see. They put something underneath or whatever it is.
But they can rise them, or there's some creative ways that we can get around that. But what we don't want is just a dead square of grass.
Yeah. I was like,
Yeah. And
cool.
it's a really great point. Honestly, Civic is a different footprint. So we're all figuring out where those portable restrooms get dropped, because they like to bring them in on a vehicle and drop them, and that vehicles can't drive on the grass. So that's really what we're all figuring out right now. But we found a few really great locations we think will work, and Oktoberfest is remaining flexible for that, and hoping to learn from Taste. So Taste will be at Civic first, and we'll have more restrooms. And so they're still flexible on what worked and doesn't work with Taste.
Got it. Great. Yeah.
Okay.
Curious to see, but it's great to have these events back down there. It'll be fun to bring more people in and have a little more activities in one space for them. So yeah. And thanks also sounds like you did a great job kind of refreshing with the car show, kind of helping to make everybody be able to get around and help the businesses as well. So thank you for doing all that. This looks great to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to comment is that I really appreciate, because I was looking at the commercial general liability insurance coverage, and so you got that lengthy email from me earlier, and it was great to hear from everyone that it has gone through our risk management to make sure that we have all the insurance coverage that we need, and then also to get a bit of the background on the policy. So that made it very helpful. I'm glad to have all of those things all straightened out, and by adding the additional insurance, particularly because there's alcohol involved, which was great to learn. My only comment is that South County Fire is not a listed. I know that there was a link. That link was impossible to. I'd have to dive into like 8 different folders from the fire, consortium, the fire fighters, whatever. But we don't have South County Fire listed on that list of the approved users or the people who use the fire department checklist for the food trucks. So if you go through that,
Can you read sorry, I'm not.
so when
The
you look,
checklist is from South County Fire.
it's from, but they're not listed as someone who's on the list of groups that because they have a list. If you go to page
So
24 on it,
South
24
County
on the-
Fire provides that.
yeah, I know. I'm not gonna make a
paperwork
fuss about it,
everywhere.
but they're not even referenced there. We have Woodinville Fire and Rescue, Valley Regional, Tukwila, South King, Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue, which isn't South County, but anyway.
Yeah, and that I believe, let me make sure we're speaking to the same thing, but that might be the locations for the inspections of the fire suppression systems and food trucks. And it might just be that South County Fire doesn't do those inspections. Sharon,
Well,
are you tracking on this one?
It's the participating fire agencies.
Page
sheet.
59.
I see what you're saying, but I also see, I get Shannon's point that we'd have to figure out what they mean by participating.
Right, okay, I was just looking and I'm just observing that South County Fire isn't on their list. And there is a link to the documents, which is awesome for someone who's got to use those documents. I didn't want to go through 8 different file folders. Anyway,
Oh, I
it
see.
sounds like they're well regulated. So, and we've been having really good food truck action at a lot of our events. So as a consumer of food trucks, I do appreciate that.
They're pretty strict. South County Fire is very, very strict with their
Oh, yeah.
enforcement on food trucks.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, exactly. No, I do appreciate all of that.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'd like to do is, Michelle, what do you want to do? Should we send this to consent?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. All right. I think that's what we will do. So we'll send that to consent for the next possible meeting, and sooner is probably better for the provider, for our vendors than later. So thank you so much, Shannon.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'll stick around for the next one.
Okay, sounds good. Our next item will be the AT&T agreement at Five Corners, and that is going to, let me read the agenda item. This came from Rob English, working with the Lighthouse Group, and this is a settlement agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS LCC. And we had seen the attached agreement, and I don't know that we're going to have much more of that. The brief narrative is the city and New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, successor in interest to AT&T Wireless Services of Washington LLC. Leasee are parties to a lease executed on or about February 18th, 2004, whereby the city leased to the lessee a certain area of the property that it owns at Five Corners, located at 8505 South Bedoin Way, Edmonds, Washington, and that's the lease. The lease is currently month-to-month status. A dispute has risen between the parties pertaining to the payment of rent for the use of the property and the calendar year of 2023. And that's a very loose chair, John. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. And the obligation and the liabilities are pertaining thereto, et cetera, that the city and the leasee have negotiated an agreed resolution subject to the city council approval. And that's what we've been looking at with this addition from yesterday. So I know not everybody has had that opportunity to take a look at it. Rob, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
I don't. This was an item that was going to be managed with Oscar, and I think it was a item that's scheduled. I think Jeff Teraday was trying to put this on for next week, so I don't have anything to add.
Right, okay. I've had a chance to review the settlement agreement, and I know that we had an executive session regarding this with full council. I don't have any hesitation about putting this on our consent agenda for the next our next consent agenda. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I had a chance to look at it as well.
Okay, and to consent?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Rob. We'll see you soon. All right, going back to our regularly scheduled agenda, 2.2, which is our Mathey Ballinger Park improvements construction contract with Kyle Woods. So go ahead, Kyle, you're on mute. Kyle, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
I'll say nice to meet everybody. I don't get to come over to City Hall too often, but we'll try to make it over there more. Today, I'm here to request approval to execute a contract for phase 2 of, we're calling it the Mathey Ballinger Park Improvements Project, kind of a general term. Phase 1 added a restroom, flushing restroom, I'll add, which was delivered on June 21st. We're finalizing inspections, utilities, and hope to have that open as soon as possible. It also includes a water service and sewer hookup. Phase 2, which is what we're doing today here, is adding a pathway from the parking lot to the playground, which right now it's not accessible to park at the parking lot and get to the playground, so we're making that accessible. The trail will also meet the interurban trail spur that was previously done probably 12 years ago by the city. And that connects directly into the interurban. There'll also be some benches, picnic tables, base for a shade structure. And we were happy with the bids. We actually, I bid out the first phase and the second phase publicly, and we have the same contractor for the second phase, so that's kind of nice. This project is funded out of REIT and doesn't impact the general fund in any way. And the contract has been reviewed by Sharon. I sent her lots of contracts. And I will answer any questions you have about this project.
Okay. Michelle, do you have any questions?
Just a quick question on the map. I don't see the me property, which I know is after the fact, which.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
is this, I mean, I know it's all done ahead of time and I don't
Yeah.
believe there's any issues because we're going into the park that's already, the pathway that's there, just making it improved, correct?
Yeah, that's actually one of my other projects, and you'll see that coming, that's out to bid right now. So that's the demolition, me property demolition. That bid is due next Tuesday. And that's totally separate than this, even though it's connected by property lines, it's separate. And that was paid for by a Conservation Futures grant.
If in the future there's any picnic tables or things, would the access come from that same parking lot, or where are we looking at maybe an additional access point potentially? I
So
don't
with
know.
the Conservation Futures, you're not really supposed to build any structures, so
Okay.
it's
That's right.
a gravel parking lot is about it. You can't put stages, you can't put too many benches. They want it to remain an open space, which is kind of the purpose of the grant. And that actually adds more than a third acreage to our park. So it's going to be a really cool addition, and it'll be like when we open that fence up, it'll look like it's just part of the park.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. I know that area. That's great. So, okay, thank you.
Okay.
No other questions?
So Kyle, my question of you is how's it been working with this contractor? Have they been meeting their targets and getting all the scope of work done?
Yeah, really good contractor so far.
Glad to hear it.
I've had on our projects, especially the small works, I tend to get a different contractor, low bid every time. So these guys I really liked working with them.
That's great to know. Okay, thank you. Vivian?
Thank you. For starters, I do want to say that I've been here the whole time. I just had missed my cues to get promoted as a panelist. I know I'm not supposed to engage if I haven't been here the whole time, but I was. On the demolition, I was just curious, that's coming, and I know that's not this exact thing, but you had mentioned
It's
it. Is
not.
that included in the purchase price on that Mead property, or is that demo funding money that we're going to have to find?
No, that was included in the grant funding.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right. Michelle, would you like to move this to consent, or do you want to bring it to the full council?
I'm fine with consent unless you think there's a reason to bring it to full
No.
council.
I think consent is a great spot for it. Thank you so much. All right. Next up is construction bids for Main Street. And that's Rob.
Yeah, good afternoon. So this is the Main Street project from 6th Avenue to 8th. It's the overlay work. And we opened, or actually we advertised bids in June, opened bids on July 9th. The city received 2 bids, one from Taylor's Excavators and the other from Road Construction Northwest. The low bid is provided by Taylor's. It was $1,331,275. With the breakdown of schedules, about 900,000 related to the roadway work, 423,000 for the stormwater work, and then $5,000 for a warranty item. The engineer's estimate itself was $1,202,000. So bids came in about 10% higher, which, given the time of year, it's not ideal. But part of this is the fact that we do have to run all our approvals through WashDOT. That took a little bit longer than we thought it would in regards to getting the federal review complete. So at this point, we've gone through our review of the bid documents. There is an issue with the disadvantaged business enterprise documents at this point. There's a 16% goal that's set by the state. Again, since there's federal funding in this project, the documents are under review. We expect an answer on that here in the next couple days. So I don't have any recommendation at this point. I would say that it appears that well, I'll just hold off providing any more information until I hear an official word from the state. So at this point, there's a couple different paths that could go forward on the 23rd, and I'll just outline them. And again, I don't have a recommendation or saying it's going to go one of these a particular way. But right now, WashDOT comes back and finds the DB documents not acceptable. Then we would recommend a rejection of bids at next week's meeting with re-advertising the project in August. If WashDOT finds the DB documents acceptable, then there's a good chance we'll recommend moving forward with the project. And then there's a third path that potentially could lead to a little bit more delay, and that's related to the DBE program itself with WashDOT. So I'll stop there on this one. And I think, unfortunately, I don't have more specific information than that, and open it up to questions.
Michelle? Any questions, Michelle?
Thanks. So I know last time it was at council, there was discussion on the design of the bike lane type, and you brought forward some different ideas. So when this comes back, as far as whatever option waiting on the state leads you to, is that something then that would come before full council back? Is that your intention?
Well, let's say if we move forward and recommend, recommend award, again, there was no official action taken by the council to change the design. Not to say that, there can be a discussion as part of the item next week, or if it has to be re-advertised, at a later date.
Yeah, because I don't remember there being a final decision on, because it's just the two blocks. We didn't see a design from 8th to 9th, and then kind of the safety issue because those center lines aren't compatible. Once a portion of that pathway or that roadway, I guess I'll say, from 9th down to the waterfront is altered. I think the way, if I remember how it was left with full council, that was still to come, because the 8th to 9th is not included in this particular project, correct?
Not included in the federal funds, but the last presentation we made, we did discuss that we have the local funded overlay project that's overlaying from 8th to 9th. That would take the bike lane on up to the intersection of 9th. So we'd have an uphill bike lane from 6th to 9th.
But no design was presented yet on how that would.
No, we showed a cross section.
Right. The
Um,
cross section was
The
there.
only thing we didn't have was a specific detail at the intersection, but the bike lane would stop, prior to the intersection with bike sharing.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm concerned a little with the safety, a little bit, actually quite a bit on the safety issue when that doesn't, the center lines aren't gonna match up with the traffic across the way, or even turning. If it's shifted over now further north and not where normal people tend to do a route, or even coming down off Main, now your center lines don't match up, you're fully offset. I think that's a safety issue that we probably really need to explore a little further with that 8th to 9th linkage. Otherwise, again, this is the 2 blocks, 3 blocks or change from what we have right now from the ferry up to 6th. However, that needs to come back, I think, to council would be my preference.
Right. And Rob, what are your thoughts? I mean, I don't have those same concerns. I think that bike lanes are a part of our sort of normal, sort of roadway structures includes bike lanes. And that's not something that we all have equal opinions about. They're all a little bit different. So, but programmatically, we need to, what would you suggest that we do?
Well, a couple things. Just one, there would, since the bike lane's dropping, the center line transition would line up at 9th. Like I mentioned, it'd drop, there'd be a bike share. So that's not an issue. And again, just kind of rehashing the purpose of the bike lane is to provide, it's an effort to meet our complete streets ordinance and provide roadway for all users. An uphill bike lane is a safety, much safer for a biker to be in a designated bike lane than not. So kind of depends on what perspective you're looking at the safety components of the project. But as far as the discussion, it's just difficult to know from a standpoint of whether we're going to be in a position to recommend award. We could at next week's meeting have a discussion. If the council wants to have more discussion on the bike lane itself, an uphill bike lane in the project, we could have that discussion at next week's meeting. And it may be either in combination with a recommendation to award or a recommendation to reject bids. Or at that point, that to me, those are the 2 options.
May I offer a suggestion? When do you think that you'll have all of your information from WashDOT?
When we talked to them on Thursday, they indicated that we probably have it, they're hoping today. So I would say either end of the day or potentially tomorrow.
What we could possibly do is reconvene a special meeting for Parks and Public Works to or maybe you can just send an email. I don't know, either one. We can be done through email or ask for a special meeting for the Parks and Public Works Committee and discussing whether or not we are able to go ahead or not. And then if we're not able to go ahead, then what we may want to just set aside for right now, this project until we until we get a compliant bid? Or would you go to the second bid? Would Taylor drop out and then we'd take the other bid?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the pricing on the second bid. It was substantially
Yeah, no, it's in front of me.
250,000. So our recommendation would not to be moving forward with that bid. We just reject bids, go
Yeah.
back out and advertise the project.
All right. All right, so my suggestion and desire would be that we hold off on this and not have it come before council until we know that we have a live contractor.
Yeah.
Michelle, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we don't want to be delaying things, and since it was left with full council last time as a discussion on the merits of what type of bike lane. Again, not saying we don't want some kind of a bike designation, just what type that would be. I think, you know, if bringing it back next week to full council on that portion of it would get more clarity, obviously, either way that it goes.
But we don't have a contractor to approve anything. There's not gonna be room for council action unless we want to spend another hour or so, which is what I believe it took last time with the presentation. We don't have a contractor. So I don't know that we can move forward.
Vivian has her hand up. I don't know, you want to add some clarity.
Okay.
I was just
We'll
gonna
see. Well,
say,
let me call on you. Okay, Vivian.
I was just gonna say that if we had the discussion about the bike lane, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't just go to consent afterwards, since it has been at committee with this discussion. But the discussion part probably should happen before we're making an award.
We already have though. Well,
It wasn't a decision.
all right. So is it scheduled for the 23rd, Vivian?
It isn't
Okay.
currently, but we could try to fit
Okay.
in.
Oh, well, all right. I'll leave that to you. So I guess, Rob, right now, we are looking for more information regarding the contractor, Taylor, and their status with WashDOT and the DBE
Correct.
component, and we'll hear more later. And maybe separating the issues about the bike lane, which seems weird. And I hope that we have another hour to talk about it, because each time we talk about bike lanes, it's about an hour. And it's never been shorter. That we can make a decision when we have a bike lane discussion, and then we'll know more about the contractor who will perform the work.
Okay.
That sounds agreeable. So yet to be decided.
So do we want to put it on next week's
No,
council meeting?
no, we don't have anything to put on unless.
Okay.
well,
Just so we wanted to add the discussion part on there.
Well, I don't know, that's gonna be council president's role to
Oh.
add, and I would say nothing less than an hour. All of our bike lane discussions have taken an hour plus. And Rob, if we end up having, if they do end up clearing up the DBE, question mark with WashDOT, then I wouldn't mind having that part go on to consent. You've worked with this group before, Taylor, before?
We have, they did the
And we're
238 walkway project for us.
Okay, and the projects all went smoothly and without
Yeah.
dispute, okay. All right. Then, I wouldn't object to having the contractor go to consent, but I guess there's still some unresolved questions about the bike lane, but that would still require an hour. And I think anything less would be disservice of scheduling it on the agenda, but that's separate.
Yeah, the only thing I would suggest, if it does go forward, maybe I can have some additional conversation with the council president, because there is a funding that we need to add to the project, since the stormwater came in higher than expected and the bid came in higher. So there's
Okay.
some additional funds that would have to be added. So I, you know, I
All right.
think until we get some information from WashDOT, it's kind of hard to say what the right action is.
Exactly. No, totally respect that. All right. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you.
Next, 2.4 is regarding the haul routes out of the Meadowdale Beach Park Estuary Restoration Project. Rob, tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is a arrangement that was put in place by the city and Snohomish County back in 2021 related to the Meadowdale Beach Park and Estuary Restoration Project that they completed. And at the start of that project, they had an estimated 2,700 truck trips would be generated on the haul route, which that haul route went through Edmonds into Linwood and out to Interstate 5. And so the route being 75th, 76th on out to Olympic View Drive. The arrangement that we put in place is that we would do a pre and post haul survey to determine, you know, what kind of damage that repetitive truck trip would place on our city street system. And the county and city agreed to hire IMS, which is a pavement management firm. They're the same firm that does our pavement rating every 3 years of our street system. So they did go out. Actually, it's a vehicle. I think we've talked about this before. It has cameras and other equipment on it that can actually evaluate the street surface, the pavement condition of this of our street. And they drove the haul route, collected that information. And then at the time of the prior to the job, our PCI was an 87. Again, 0 to 100 is the scale. So we actually had a good street segment that they were hauling on. At the conclusion of the project, which was late last year, the PCI had, the pavement condition index had dropped to an 80. And with the model that IMS has, they can actually forecast what that PCI should have been if all those repetitive truck trips hadn't been on the street. And so it should have been an 85. So based on that information, they generated a cost of just over $142,000 as a payment for damages related to the hauling of that work. And just following up on Councilmember Payne's questions, you know, haul route agreements are a tool that public agencies can implement when there's a project in a neighboring city or you know, for instance, sometimes WashDOT has a project, and if that goes through a city, there's always the opportunity to implement this type of agreement to collect these type of payments. And in this case, again, we relied on IMS, who was the payment consultant, to use their modeling, and they're a nationwide firm, and they generated the cost for us in this case. And the county's agreed to it. The city council, or excuse me, not the city council, the county council has already approved the agreement. And so at this point, we're just recommending that to go forward and be placed on the consent agenda for approval next week.
So thank you for answering my questions. I mean, this first time I've seen a haul agreement, cost recovery, or, you know, recovery for the damage, which makes it, you know, very interesting. So hadn't seen one, and your email said that you hadn't seen one done by the city in the time that you've been here too, correct?
Correct.
Pretty amazing. All right. And my guess is that, okay, so question, what is the condition trigger for kind of renewing the street?
Well, there's several ranges, you know, when you start getting into the 80s, even high 70s, the kind of the first layer of pavement management is like some type of seal coat. So whether that's a slurry seal, counties typically do chip seals. There's microsurfacing, which is a little bit newer technology. that's kind of the first realm of pavement management
Okay,
that can be done, and then it just kind of drops, you know, next one would be a pavement overlay, and then if the PCI is really bad, pavement reconstruction.
all right. All right, well, interesting, and it's great to see this. Michelle, do you have some questions?
Yeah, I do. Great that we did this. I think that makes perfect sense that we should be recovering the costs. The one thing from what I understand on these roads is when it gets to a certain point, we don't want to let it degrade further. So I mean, with the money that we're supposed to receive, is that then prioritizing this particular project to move up because we don't want to allow that degradation to then cost more money than to repair, or does that make sense? I think what I'm.
Yeah, you know, we're not doing a specific designation for these routes. It's the again, 80 is a fairly good score, you know, even though it dropped from 87 to 80. But it will go into our street department fund, which is obviously where they you know, pay and do our street maintenance work.
So that earmarked, the 142,800 doesn't go specifically to this route.
No.
Why not?
Well, I guess in the end, it would be wrapped up into something potentially down the line when we're ready to do a type of pavement application or repair. But at this point, there's no project identified specifically for that route.
Okay, just because it seems like if that's the route that's been, say, overused to get it to an 80 versus what it should have been an 85. To me, that seems pretty big number. But I'm not understanding how the money all layers and is earmarked or not earmarked. That was my question, so which you've answered.
And there are other streets in the city that score lower than 80, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, much lower.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it probably goes to where the need is most highest.
Okay.
All
Great.
right. Consent? What do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, excellent. We'll put it on consent for our next meeting. Next up is the professional services agreement for the Edmonds Marsh Estuary Planning Study. Rob, talk to us.
Yeah, so this is another item that Oscar was taking the lead on, so I filling in today, obviously, since he's resigned. The agreement was approved by the grant agreement was approved by the City Council in March. You may recall that presentation, which was the grant for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And the actual grant amount was for $135,000. And we went ahead and issued a request for qualifications to select a consultant to move forward with the study. And 3 firms responded to that. 3 firms were Blue Coast Engineering, Herrera, and then Shannon and Wilson. And so the selection panel, based on their qualifications and experience, chose Blue Coast to go forward with a contract. And in your packet is the proposed agreement with the scope and fee. The scope has 3 primary tasks. The first is a hydrologic evaluation and hydraulic modeling. And so they're going to develop or refine the model that was in place before and update it and use it to develop 2 alternatives for modeling purposes. One related to restoration that excludes the Unocal site with the channel along the west end of the Unocal property. And then the second, restoration that includes area within the Unocal site to the maximum extent feasible, because obviously there's areas that have contamination, but obviously are trying to be addressed. Then from that task, there's a contamination impact analysis is the second one. And this will be an effort to compile and review the existing information that's been done from a contamination standpoint on the Unocal site, and then to catalog that information for soil, groundwater, and remediation actions. There's also a task to hire Ken Letterman, who's I believe a MACA attorney or familiar with MACA protocol, to look at the review and the regulations associated with contamination, and then identify risk with potential future land ownership. That would be goals identified. And then the information would help guide the analysis of the alternatives in the actual report. The third task is the planning and public outreach. And so there's 2 public workshops currently scoped. One would be a project background meeting, and then a second would be a summary of findings public meeting once the alternative analysis are complete and the study's complete and all the information's known. And then task 4 is just the site visits and project management to actually manage the project from the consultant side of things through the course of the study. The fee is $174,997. And again, the funding will be paid by both the grant and local match. And in this case, the local match is being paid by the Fund 17. And again, the estimated total project cost is $226,000, and there's match being provided for staff time as well as the citizen advisory group that's helping with this effort. And I believe Craig Ferguson was with Oscar during the presentation in March. Bill Derry's also been helping staff with the scope of fee since they helped write the actual grant agreement, scope for the grant agreement. So they've been providing assistance with staff to move this forward. And so with that, that's all I have.
Okay. Michelle, do you have questions?
I know since you're not lead on this or haven't, follow or been with Oscar gone, I don't know if you have this answer, but I know that there was a meeting coming up about the site that now has been canceled in August, and it seems like things are being delayed on the end of the ecology and UNICAL. So I understand kind of the idea that, if we would go outside the UNICAL property, since there are contaminated areas, but since we don't really know what's going to happen to those contaminated areas, I believe there's the pipe, but then there's also, I think, 3 others outside of that could be impactful to anything going through the marsh to the sea. How do we really align those, this project with information that's still pending, to not kind of then have to go backwards and say, well, now that we found out later from UNICAL or this other track, we have other information now that changes things. So do you have any thoughts on or input on lining up with the other facts that are coming?
I don't. I think that's obviously, part of the consultant team that's been put together, would be able to provide, a better answer to that question. I think there's obviously standards that have to be complied with. And, that would be taken into it, but, I'd have to rely on the consultant team to answer that question. So that's something I can look into a response for.
Is there a time frame that this particular grant or all this has to be done by?
There is, and I think the initial grant was written for the end of this year. We are asking for an extension of time just because it's taking a little bit longer to get a consultant under contract, and I think we're looking at either spring or late or early summer for that extension. So there is a timeline that we need to move forward with.
Okay. And I don't know if there's any other input from anybody that can help.
Well,
It just seems like there's 2 tracks to me, at least the way I'm understanding this is one track, which sounds great, but then there's another track that's going to give us more detail as far as the UNICAL site property cleanup. So I just don't want to have, too much go down the road too far without kind of having the impacts relayed to us from the Department of Ecology and the UNICAL track. But it doesn't sound like anybody has any answers here today, so.
Well, so from the agenda memo and from our presentation, the purpose of this grant is for the gap analysis with existing data, and the existing data came from ecology. I know that they're always gathering more data every so often, but I haven't looked at the ecology website lately, but they have collected all the past data, and this is to help sort out what we need for planning, is my understanding. So I'm comfortable with having this approval for Blue Coast to move through and go to council for approval. And as ecology works through the things that they need to be working through, and with also the identification of a MACA attorney to help with the identification of what we need to be paying attention to with the Model Toxics Act. I think that that's also been revised recently, so it's good to have a subject matter expert in place on that as well. I'm excited to see some of the planning beginning so that we can set up plans to make this a more efficient marsh estuary that goes out to Puget Sound. So I'm comfortable with some of the vagueness that's going on with the private property and ecology. That's still in private hands, but having access to the data, I think, will help, and having Blue Coast provide us some ability to understand what's necessary to do effective planning, that can help to move this whole project. At least position us that if it does become a viable project, either on the footprint that we already have, or if we are able to take on the UNICAL property once all of those issues have been resolved, that we will be in a much better position to be able to move along with more planning. So, Michelle, and then I guess my question of you, Rob, is I'm hoping that it looks like there's going to be 2 public presentations in this contract, and the scoping. Will the consultant be able to come in and give a presentation to council, at the midpoint or at a logical point?
Yeah, let me follow up. Would you want one at the midpoint and then at the conclusion, or how many touches would you want the city council?
I think, I'd be comfortable with one maybe at the 2/3 mark, or whatever it makes logical sense, or if there's a major event horizon that occurs, that there's, something that happens with UNICAL, some big discovery, if there's some major event in the planning process where all of a sudden, it opens up a whole new door, because because there's a lot of unknowns still. And I think that this part of this study is to help us understand where the gaps are.
I think probably
I'd leave it to the consultants and the experts, regarding this. But I do think council and the public would like to have an update on this at some point.
there is a public meeting, when the
Right.
I'd say the draft plan's ready. I'm sure that's the timing when the findings, the way the scope's written. I guess what would make sense to me that I don't recall seeing in there is a presentation to the council. So there'd be a public meeting, right? But then I
Yeah.
assume council would want a presentation, their own presentation of the findings. Is that correct?
Yeah, because then it's preserved on video, and it can be available to a broader part of the community just by being able to put a pointer back to a presentation to council.
Okay.
And and I hope that I think that we would normally, with a project that's like this, and this is so brand new, and what a great gift from the community to be able to put this all together, put the grant together and work so closely with the city. I think this is just, a groundbreaking sort of model. I think that council touch point would be appropriate. Michelle, can we put this to consent or do you have other questions?
Yeah, I think after tax two is kind of when would make sense to get that touch point. And that would also then also be able to advertise whatever type of outreach is going to occur right after. If that's like you're saying, to have that preserved and have that out there to a broader audience, could be helpful. And again, I'm curious to find out, if they're using the existing contamination, framework of what's there now versus what potentially could happen, I guess. That's up to the consultant and what they're looking at. I'll be curious to find out what they find on that. So, yeah, consent would be fine with adding in a council touch point.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This
Yeah,
is going to
thank you.
be, oh, Vivian, you have a question.
I do. I have a couple. Thank you. For starters, I think my original impression had been that it was going to be the staff time that was the match, but this is saying that there was an additional contribution from the Marsh Estuary Fund. Do you know that to be true? I know you're just stepping into this, Rob, not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think the presentation that Oscar and Greg gave in March, they had a slide in the presentation, and let's see if I can pull that out, because I think that showed what the how they're running the match. So they had again, 226 was the total project cost. Grant amount was 135, local match 91. And then they had staff time in-kind match 34,000, citizen cash donation of 35,000, and then volunteer hours of 22,000 is what and I'm just reading from the slide that was presented in March. And so there it says there will be a $170,000 environmental consultant law firm contract, and so right now it's 174, so it's about where that target was set for the budget.
Okay, so that 91K is what came from the Marsh Estuary Fund?
Yes, that would be the match.
Okay. And then my only other thing was, if we're asking for another presentation to council and we're expecting that to come from the consultants, that's probably not in the current scope, which means it's not going to be included in that price. So that might be a discussion that would have to come through as a budget amendment and, a decision for council to make, as opposed to it being a direction from the committee, since it would be money. Yeah, so I mean, just kind of throwing that out there.
Good point.
Yeah, I think that this is a significant enough project, both with how it's been put together. It would be, let's find out how much more it would cost to have a council presentation, a couple hours of prep, a couple and an hour, with the council.
I think
I'm
that's
sure
a
I'm
good question.
simplifying way more than what it looks like, but let's find out what it would add to there.
So yeah, I intended that, yeah, there would be an adder for that, and I just outlined that in the agenda memo. Hopefully I can get that information by tomorrow, by the time the packet's due. And then just attach it as a consent item. That would be one option, which I think Councilmember Payne's suggesting. The other option is we put the agreement on as is, and once we get a little bit later down the road, we can do a supplement to add that presentation.
Or we could propose it as a budget amendment and see if council wants to pass the budget amendment for that change, once we know how much it is.
Well, so there's really, I don't think it warranted a budget amendment. We actually have, I added a budget amendment in the second quarter to take care of this project, and it's going to span 2 years. So I would the presentation would occur in 25. When we build our 25 budget, that number would just be programmed in, and when you guys get the budget in the fall, that number would be baked
Got
in.
it. So it would be a budget decision.
Yeah.
Instead, I got it.
Right.
Great. All right, Michelle, still to consent with all that information?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
I'm sorry, let me
I
just
mean,
make
as
sure
long
I'm
as
clear.
Rob understands, yeah, I think we need clarity on what goes on and said.
Do you want me to do it as an adder for next week or just run with what's in the packet today?
Run with what's in the packet and, you know, looking forward to their presentation to council.
We'll add a supplement down the line for it.
Sweet. Yeah, that would work very well for me.
Okay,
Yeah. That
all
makes
right,
sense.
thank you.
Agree.
All right, thank you. And finally, the carbon recovery project amendment. Rob.
This should be being presented by Ross.
Ross, and he is there in the waiting room.
Great.
I see Bill Derry has his hand up and I know we can't acknowledge attendees typically unless he was expected to participate in this in some way. Just making you aware.
Oh, he put his hand down now.
That was me that raised my hand because I wasn't sure how this worked.
Oh, that was you. Okay, we also had a hand raised from Bill Derry, who's been a part of the prior discussion, but he's put his hand down. So he can send us an email. Ross, let's talk about the carbon recovery project amendment.
Yeah, if we have to.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Well, much like HKA that we worked with a couple weeks ago when they came to the meeting and Nate talked to you guys. This is another one of our critical contractors. It's not part of the contract for the carbon recovery project. It's excluded, so that's why we have to pay for this. Now, I think the main reason, so basically this whole thing come about because it's taken so long for this project to get done. As you can see, there's been 2 other 1-year extensions and the project still isn't done. And so we're hoping this one gets us to the end. I talked to Parametrics and they forecasted, we have $30,000 left in the budget for this PSA, and he forecasted it'd probably take about 50 to 55 total to close this out for what's left in the programming. He's our control systems programming guy. He does the integration between Eco Remedy stuff and the city's Wonderware SCADA system. They kind of go over all of the communication drawings that come out from instrumentation, from electrical. They do all the startup and testing on our screens, make sure all of our controls work. And he also helps with the operation system, kind of the dialing it in and making sure it functions for us. Control system strategies and things of that nature. So, I mean, basically, we can't lose this guy. And I think so far, you know, this was scheduled to be a budget to get us through August 31st of 2022, I believe, is the original date on this. And so in 3 years, us being able to just add 25,000, I think we've used the allotted money as well as we could have with Parametrics. And so we just need to extend it 1 more year and add the $25,000 and hopefully that gets us done.
Okay. So Ross, thank you so much for the presentation. So this is the city's fee and it's not shared amongst our partners?
No, it's shared amongst the partners. What I meant by that is it's not part of the actual C511 project. This along with HKA is separate and paid for by the city and its partners, but not under the C511 heading.
Right, and it sounds like you believe that the balance of the 25,000 will take us to the completion.
Yeah, I got with Parametrics before this contract expired at the end of June, and you know, kind of I mean, all they can do is give me their best guess.
Sure.
You know, maybe it'll take less, and I sure hope it doesn't take more, but he's usually pretty good with that.
Right, and our SCADA system is fairly new. I think that it's,
Yeah, part of the initial funding that we had for this was to upgrade us from 2017 to the 2020 version of Wonderware. But the good thing about this project taking so long is that, you know, we kind of postponed that upgrade and then we upgraded straight to 2023. So
okay,
we were able to, you know, save some money there by doing that upgrade. The Parametrics likes to, as soon as the upgrade comes out, they don't put it in like on day one. They give it 6 months for all the bugs to be worked out and all the updates to be put in. And then we did it. So we did get to wait, and we got a bonus upgrade with that whole thing. So
we got a leapfrog.
we did. Yeah, that was nice.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Michelle, your thoughts?
Nothing at this time.
All right, shall we move this to consent?
Yes.
All right. So
Okay.
just thank you very much, Ross, and for joining us this afternoon. I think that concludes our agenda. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 2:36 and give everybody back an hour of your
Thank you.
time, just a bit, just short of the hour. So thanks, everybody. and
Thank you all
enjoy
so
your
much.
afternoons.
And
Thank you.
thanks for
Thanks.
stepping in, Rob, for short notice on all these too.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.